Hello. This screencast is designed as an introduction to Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, which I'm preparing for a Year 10 class about to study the play as part of their edXL IGCSE course. I hope it will be useful to anybody that finds it, and it should also be used at any point during your learning process. There's nothing better than going back over earlier material as time progresses, every 2 or 3 weeks, a little listen. Whilst you're listening, please make notes relating both to what I'm saying, but also to 1 or 2 links that I've provided in the screencast to help you engage, particularly with the wider contexts of the play itself. So, the play is a comedy. It's designated as such in Shakespeare's writings, and I think it's worth spending a moment at this stage, and more time later, just making a very simple point. A comedy is not simply a play that makes us laugh. Comedies were written, they are a type, a genre, to very strict guidelines, and these are guidelines which have come down to Shakespeare from ancient Greece, from writers like Menander, through Terence and Plautus, writing in Latin, until eventually Shakespeare has received this genre and extended and developed it in his own way. Comedies have a stock plot. Broadly speaking, a comic plot involves a boy and a girl aiming to marry. Their love is somehow thwarted, often by a father, certainly by some form of authority figure. The girl is disgraced, it is always her fault, never the boy's. The girl goes into hiding in some way before, through various machinations, she is able to re-emerge, cleared of all stain and taint to her character, and the marriage ensues. Now, obviously, there is laughter, there is humour, much of it deriving from the outwitting of the old men, the authority figures, and the challenging of hierarchies. This is something that Shakespeare develops significantly in this play. You will find that the eventual unravelling of the various plot lines is undertaken by the lowest status characters on stage. That notwithstanding, and all the visual and situation humour that we find, this is a play in which the treatment of the female lead in particular can be very harsh and upsetting, and to watchers or readers in the 21st century also so imbued with a level of sexism that it can be quite uncomfortable watching this play, and we find ourselves occasionally thinking, this isn't remotely funny, but of course it doesn't need to be in order to be a comedy. A lot of the humour of the play is carried through wordplay, punning, through clever use of language. As an example, the title itself carries about, well, at least 3 layers of meaning. There's the obvious much ado about nothing, a storm in a teacup, a lot of fuss about very little. The word nothing would probably have been pronounced more in the way of noting in Elizabethan England. Noting as a verb, of course, is to look closely at something and not to be satisfied with first appearances. Much of this play is based on errors of noting, and your teacher will take you through this and will be looking at moments where people either should have noted or thought they had noted but misunderstood what they had seen or heard. The final layer, and again it's a layer that is important as we read the play because a lot of the humour will derive from it, is essentially a title saying much ado about sex, rather in the way of the farces that used to run, the whoops, there go my trousers and so on, that used to run at the Whitehall Theatre in London. This is a play about sex, it's a play about marriage, it's a play about relationships between men and women. In Elizabethan England, the word nothing or noting, or just the symbol, the zero symbol, was a slang term for female sexual organs. This play is clearly saying that it is a play which is looking at issues around sex, lust, marriage, and it's a play which doesn't fly away from using a great deal of sexual innuendo within the comic interplay that is seen. And that's just the title. Shakespeare takes the comic plot, and being Shakespeare, he refines and develops. Not for him one plot, for him two. And he will intertwine these two plots. Both will ultimately lead towards an outcome relating to marriage. He has one, the straightforward one, if you like. A young boy and girl fall in love, complications ensue, the girl is disgraced. And we know, because it's a comedy, that she will be cleared. We just don't quite know how it will work, and so on and so forth. The other pair are perhaps more interesting. I have to be careful. They don't seem to be a pair of lovers, and it indeed requires the intervention of outsiders to trick them into believing that they are in love, so that their love can blossom. Within this, he's added all sorts of elements. The old men, the authority figures referred to in the first slides about comedy, but also a company of low-status fools who are instrumental in unravelling all the problems. And they, although the humour of their writing to a modern audience does not seem desperately clever, they would have been a chance for the ordinary men, women watching from the pit of the globe to have a laugh at people much like themselves on stage, making mistakes, being crude, being earthy, being violent, but ultimately also being very successful and very necessary. The first piece of work I'd like you to do when you watch this is to look at the link that's here on the screen. It's important that we understand the contemporary context relating to the writing, and the most important of these really is the position of women in society. I've said here in short they were silent and serving, they obeyed male authority in all matters. They did, but I'd like you to read, make some notes, looking particularly at what was expected of women in terms of marriage and education and the roles they might play in life. There are two main females in the play, remember, there are two intertwined plots. Very different characters, very different presentations, if you like, of acceptable behaviour. And this, of course, has a contemporary context of its own. The silent female, doing as she's bidden by all men, of course, had clear opposition at this time in the form of the Queen. A monarch cannot remain silent, obedient, and unnoticed, and Queen Elizabeth is often quoted as stating that although she has the form of a woman, inside she has the heart of a man. And I think one of the things that we need to look at as we read the play is how this male-female split is perhaps shown within the female characters. It certainly isn't possible to read this play without an awareness of the impact and importance of Elizabeth I on the throne, but also the need for Shakespeare to maintain a degree of royal patronage. Elizabeth would like to see women presented strongly, women that might echo her in everyday life. In a modern theatre, much of the humour focuses on the second pair, on Beatrice and Benedick. And the traditional comic duo, if you like, do go missing somewhat. I mean, Hero, the principal female in that plot, barely says anything throughout the play. But also we tend to see with casting weight placed on the second pair. Recent production starring David Tennant and Catherine Tate, which we'll see at moments of while we're watching, seemed very much to put these two stars of television into the play and focus everything around their visual wordplay. Interestingly, another take on this, there's some pictures coming up, was at the Old Vic Theatre earlier this year, where Beatrice and Benedick were played by Vanessa Redgrave and James Earl Jones. Both of them are pensioners, not young people going out about life, but very obviously a pair that had been round the block a fair amount. The play survives most tellings. There are, of course, therefore, many different approaches to the play, and the text is going to be the key to your understanding and ultimately to your examination. On the next page is a little sequence of dialogue, and have a look at it, see if you can recognise what is happening. Now, you can pause and read this from this screen. You don't need to listen to me talking. It's a snap of dialogue from the first scene of the play. I'd like you to have a look, see what you think is happening, and when you feel you've understood it, move the screenshot on. Okay? It's worth just spending some time before you finish, just writing down the basic insults. You can write them down both in their Shakespearean form and modern English, and the responses that they get. It's rather like a game of tennis. But what I want you to do is see if you can work out who wins this particular merry war. Now, when you've done all that, we're pretty well ready to start reading. I want you to get used to the following mnemonic. This is the mnemonic SCSE, and you can see on the screen what the mnemonic stands for. We'll be applying this to every scene. In every scene we read, we should be looking at setting, that is to say time of the action, era, actual location, and any other maybe natural phenomena that help to create the setting. We should be looking closely at how the characters are presented, and then in terms of action, what they do. There is never a scene in which there is no action. Style refers to the way in which the passage under consideration has been written. And in this passage that you've just looked at, you'll notice that there's very quick sharing of insults. The lines are short, the lines are in prose, and everything moves very fast, for example. The final element of SCSE, ideas, refers to the writer's ideas, the ideas the writer is trying to present, their philosophy, if you like. It is conceivable that for many people this is a play about, in other words, the ideas, about equality within marriage, trying to challenge the perception that only men are strong. There are many other ideas, and we will be applying SCSE to every scene that we read. I hope this has been useful, and I hope we're going to enjoy reading this play. Thank you for listening.